Hey everyone, Chris Carter here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. We talk about how Mike Tomlin's comments at the NFL owners meetings reflect more about the Steelers' plans than you realize, even though he was very bland about Aaron Rodgers in that situation. We talk about all of that here and take some of your questions on a Mock Draft Monday episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. All right, Steelers fans, let's get into it from over the weekend. We hope that you had a good weekend. One thing that happened on Sunday was NFL owners meetings while they were happening all over the weekend. But Mike Tomlin spoke to Steelers reporters in Palm Beach, Florida. Our own Jerry Dulac of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette was there talking about that and getting to talk to Mike Tomlin. We'll get to the Aaron Rodgers part of it, but the bottom line of the Aaron Rodgers comments, more of the same, as in the sense that you know what he was going to say before he said it. He's not going to reveal anything about it. Just basically said, hey, you know, they don't have a deadline, blah, blah, blah. He hadn't thought a lot about it. The Steelers aren't waiting too hard on Aaron Rodgers. They're just waiting to see what he says, and that's that. As we've talked about it for a long time on the show, the quarterback situation this year was always a punt to next year. I don't think that they're playing on that, but I'll talk more about that in the next segment because there's some interesting calls that I think ask the right questions about how the Steelers are handling this situation. We'll get to that there. What I thought was a little bit more illuminating or interesting, at least in my opinion, was how Mike Tomlin addressed DK Metcalf questions with how he would mix with the offense. Because Mike Tomlin was very beaming about DK Metcalf. He said DK's an awesome talent. He's someone we're familiar with. And he talked about how the combination of him and Pickens, and this to me was what was the important thing here. He said, I know as a guy who grew up on the defensive side of the ball, we got multiple people schematically that you've got to work to minimize it. And talking about Metcalf and Pickens being on the field at the same time. He says it really challenges you in some of the things that you do. We see similar challenges within our division, so we're excited about putting together a group that has that type of collective pressure. And it sounds to me like Mike Tomlin and the Steelers really do want Metcalf and George Pickens to be a heck of a duo. Now, maybe that's a lie. Maybe this is a smokescreen, but I do think that this is part of the plan right now is they want to make these guys dangerous. They want to make these guys an actual duo. I know there's been the narrative out there that the Steelers are just absolutely going to trade George Pickens, but as I've said on the show, I'm not also sure that they will. Now, I think that if someone comes in with a haul for George Pickens and says we're willing to give up a second and some change or whatever, that's a different story. But if someone comes with anything less than a second-round pick, why would you give up George Pickens when you know that if he hits the open market, he's probably getting a decent contract, and if he gets a decent contract, you're getting that third-round comp pick for him. So if I'm the Steelers, I ride it out with him, and I see if I can keep him around. But if George Pickens strikes and does well this year, it might encourage you to make some more decisions after that to keep him around. Mike Tomlin also went on to say it's not only in terms of tangible things that DK Metcalf brings, he says, but there's an awesome intangible quality to him as a worker and as a man that's it's equally exciting. He also said that DK and George are different people. When people try to say that, are they just both the same receiver? He said GP is tall. DK is big. There's a difference. And I think that that's kind of funny the way he put it. Both guys have height, but DK Metcalf is a thick, large, muscular individual, whereas George is tall, but he don't got the bully muscle that DK Metcalf got on him. But here's what I think could be really interesting moving forward is if you look at the schematics part of things and how he's talking about George Pickens, I think that this puts the ball in George Pickens' court that we talked about this past year. George Pickens needed to show out and have a really big third year to prove to the Steelers that he deserved the big contract as a wide receiver one to stick around and to be the receiver that they built around in the wide receiver room. Obviously, he didn't do that because they went and traded for DK Metcalf. He's now the wide receiver one. He's got wide receiver one money. But that doesn't mean the Steelers don't have to try to keep George Pickens around if they really want to. Because as we know, George Pickens is a heck of a talent. let's say George Pickens has a really big year this year. Let's say that both of these guys have 1,000-yard seasons, even with Mason Rudolph or Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, and you see the potential in them. I do not put it past the Steelers to want to franchise tag George Pickens and say, we're going to keep him around for another year and then maybe another year after that, or to sign him to a 3-year contract where you find a way to pay him. And a lot of people probably say, whoa, you're already paying DK Metcalf more money than you've ever paid any receiver ever. But I actually look at that situation and I think, you know what? This might be the time for the Steelers to be aggressive in trying to keep playmakers if they really like their playmakers. And if George Pickens blows up this year with DK Metcalf and the two of them become a heck of a duo, why not sign George Pickens to a big money contract? Because next year you're going to have more money and you still probably won't be paying a quarterback super NFL money. This is part of what I think could be happening with the Steelers' plan to get a quarterback in next year's NFL draft. If they go get a quarterback in 2026 with that draft class that proposes to be a better unit, that are a better group than this group of prospects, you could have a quarterback from that draft class on your roster on a rookie deal money for the next 5 seasons. That would give you plenty of time to play out the combination of Metcalf and Pickens if you wanted to make them a combo. But again, this doesn't mean that the Steelers are locked into it. I think what Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan and what they might be planning to do with Pickens and Metcalf is they've trusted Metcalf because of his ability to develop and show what he could do in Seattle. They need to see George Pickens mature. I think they do need to see him grow into being that kind of a player. But if he does, they pay him. But if he doesn't, then they would let him walk or they'd trade him if someone really wants him. But this gives them the opportunity to be able to pair them together and say, hey, you know what? If we want to make one of the best wide receiver duos in the NFL, we could do that right now. Now, I'll preface this too, because I see some people take this out of context when someone says that. Saying that they were one of the best wide receiver duos in the NFL, if they were to pair together, does not mean that that either one of them is a top 5 or even top 10 wide receiver. But put them together, I do think that talent-wise, you would struggle to find too many more that are better. I think you could say Chase and Higgins for the Bengals, Jefferson and Addison for the Vikings. If Godwin sticks around with Mike Evans, maybe they'd be. But I don't think that I think that if you had picked wide receiver combos, wide receiver duos, they would be right up there. If you were able to just look at talent wise, and you need to see them perform together. That's a whole different thing. We got to still got to see their quarterback, but I do think the Steelers have it within them to plan to keep around George Pickens for the long term if he works out this next year with the quarterback situation with DK Metcalf and he shows maturity, because then you can keep those guys together. They're a heck of a 1-2 punch at quarterback. And as I've been saying, I really do think the overall plan for the Steelers right now at quarterback is to draft a quarterback in 2026, which is supposed to be a better draft class. And when they come in, they can hop in as a rookie and be plugged into an offense that's already working without too much being asked of the quarterback position in the first place. I think that's the whole point of this year, is why they're not going after a major quarterback. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is the guy they're settling with right now if he chooses them. But as Mike Tomlin said in this meeting, they'd be fine if Mason Rudolph was the guy. And if Mason Rudolph or Aaron Rodgers are able to light it up with DK Metcalf and George Pickens, and the offensive line develops and there's a run game that's present there, then all of a sudden if you get your star quarterback in the NFL draft, you get this version of Jaden Daniels plugging into that offense that now has 2 playmaking wide receivers, playmaking tight end and Pat Freiermuth, a better offensive line, a real run game, and a real defense. Then all of a sudden you do become a serious contender. And that is a quick way to rise up the ranks, which is why I don't think they're putting it past they're putting the idea past them right now to say that George Pickens could earn his way to sticking around just a little bit longer. I don't think that he'll get DK Metcalf money, but I do think that he could be a person that they say, hey, you know what? We're going to find a way to keep this guy around because he could be dangerous with DK Metcalf, and because you're not paying an NFL quarterback, a superstar quarterback rate. That's the time that you have to be aggressive in keeping certain guys. But again, George Pickens will have to prove that, and that'll be up to him in this upcoming season. But I do want to talk about the things that Mike Tomlin did say about quarterback, and we'll get to some of your questions in the Locked On Steelers call-in line, because a few of you guys asked quarterback questions, and I think there's some really good ways to ask these questions that you guys did. We'll get to that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I remind you this show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. Of course, y'all know about FanDuel with March Madness being here. FanDuel gives you a chance to get in on all the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 back in bonus bets when you hit on your first bet of $5 or more. That's right, $200 in extra bucks that you can use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. I mean, I don't know who the Final Four is, so be sure to get your picks in for the Final Four and who's going to win it all in March Madness right on FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. FanDuel is an app that's simple and easy to use. When I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. With tournament days happening all the time, there's always something going on. And now that baseball season's going on, you can bet on that too. So much action, so much fun. Get in on it on FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com to get started and you get all your college hoops action all tournament long. Also, don't forget, new customers can sign up at FanDuel.com and get $200 in bonus bets when you hit on your first bet of $5 or more. That's $200 in bonus bets when you hit on your first bet of $5 or more. FanDuel.com. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our show here today. Let's get to some call-in questions. As always, you can call in with questions to the show at 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from. Keep your question under a minute. Please keep your question under a minute. For those y'all who don't do that and like it goes to like 2 minutes, yeah, we can't do that on the show. We got a lot of things to get to. But a lot of you guys keep calling in with questions, and I thought I'd answer some more of the quarterback questions because of, again, I didn't want to lead with the quarterback because I don't think that was the big thing that Mike Tomlin talked about at Owners' Day meetings. But I do think, of course, we do got to talk about it. First, let's get through Mike Tomlin's quote and we'll get to those questions. Mike Tomlin said, quote, "It's been reported that he spent a day with us and it was a really good day. He and I obviously known each other for some time, so it was really good to spend some time together and to get to know each other more intimately." He said deadlines don't often bring that to a head, talking about why there isn't a deadline for Aaron Rodgers right now. He's like, and then asked if he would have to settle on, if he would like to have this situation settled before the draft. Mike Tomlin said, "I hadn't thought a lot about it, to be honest with you." And a lot of people then are wondering, wait, they're not going to have this settled by the draft? Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but I think there's a point to this that Mike Tomlin's trying to do. There's a little game the Steelers are playing a little bit here that is kind of just keeping people from knowing what their deal is. Now, several people nationally have been suggesting or picking the Steelers in their mock drafts to take a quarterback in the first round, whether that's Jackson Dart or Jalen Milroe. But I think it's kind of interesting to hear Mike Tomlin talk about the situation that they have right now when he was asked if they go out and get a veteran quarterback if Aaron Rodgers didn't work out. He didn't fully commit to that. And he also talked about, the process that they're going through right now. He says, quote, "Omar and I just got off a nice tour last week. We were at Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Texas, for example. I think all three of those institutions have quarterbacks that are draft eligible, so it's been a good process for us." Now, of course, when he's talking about those three quarterbacks at those three institutions, he's talking about Notre Dame's Riley Leonard, Ohio State's Will Howard, and he's talking about Texas's Quinn Ewers. None of those guys are start them now quarterbacks. These are not future franchise quarterbacks. So to me, I do think the Steelers are playing a bit of a game here where they are trying to, they are not showing their full hand as far as what they're doing at quarterback, what they're doing, what they're targeting in the draft, because they want to make it a mystery so that teams can't jump over them or jump over them for the wrong reasons and, cause mayhem for other teams and, allow them to kind of disguise what their plan is. It's always best to go into the draft with people not knowing what your real plan is, because then they can't take advantage of you. And I think that's where the Steelers are trying to play here. And that's kind of what Vince from New Jersey suggested in his call. Here's Vince from New Jersey asking us about the Steelers quarterback situation.
Yes, this is Vince from Jersey, first-time caller. The question is, you don't think that the Steelers and Aaron Rodgers have already come to a decision that he is coming? They're just not letting anyone know so they won't leak or give out any draft strategies, hoping teams would think they're in for a quarterback early, when in reality, Aaron Rodgers has already agreed. Thanks for taking my call. Love the show.
Thank you, Vince. As always, you can call like Vince did at 412-223-6644. Leave your name and keep your question in a minute. And remind us where you're from. But Vince, let me answer it this way. I don't think the Steelers are intentionally telling Aaron Rodgers, no, don't announce that you're accepting the deal. We won't announce that you're accepting the deal. Don't accept the deal. Buy us some time so we can get to the draft and no one knows what we're actually doing. I think that I think that it's like I've said on the show. They've offered Aaron Rodgers a contract. It's up to him to decide if he wants to do it. But I do think they're kind of giggling in the corner while everyone thinks, oh, the Steelers don't know what they want to do. The Steelers are fine if Aaron Rodgers signs and if Aaron Rodgers doesn't sign, because they knew that this was not the year that they were going to be so great at quarterback or anything like that. I think they're fine with Mason Rudolph as is if they need to be, and they'll draft a guy in the middle rounds, like I've been saying, like, again, Mike Tomlin alluded to with Notre Dame, Ohio State, and in Texas, because none of those three guys, in my opinion, are start-em now quarterbacks. So I think the Steelers are kind of just giggling in the corner, like, yeah, Aaron Rodgers, take for. Oh, yes, we're totally interested in a quarterback in the first round, because that's exactly what we want to do, is reach for a quarterback in the first round in a bad quarterback draft class when we're amassing comp picks for next year, which is supposed to be a much better quarterback draft class, so that we can draft a quarterback in the first round this year and then still want to draft a quarterback in the first round next year, because that's exactly what you want to do when you're building a franchise. And I say that all sarcastically because that's not what they're doing. They're not trying to draft a quarterback this early. And that gets to our next question here. Bryce from North Platte, Nebraska, who brings up two guys that the Steelers might draft in those positions. Here's Bryce.
Hey, Chris. This is Bryce from North Platte, Nebraska. My question is, I see a lot of reports now that the Steelers are showing interest in Jackson Dart and Jalen Milroe as even potential first-round quarterbacks. One, do you believe that could be a selection they could make? Or two, do you think it is like a Malik Willis situation of the year of Kenny Pickett, where we were believed to have so much interest in Malik Willis? Thanks for my question. Love the show. Bye.
Thank you for your question, Bryce. I think this is a smokescreen. I got to be honest. We know the Steelers put out, because every team does this. We know the Steelers and every team, they put out smokescreen stories. They tell certain people certain things to get that out there. So people are like, oh, the Steelers are interested in this. Meanwhile, they have no interest in that whatsoever. Their whole point is they want to distract you from what they're really doing so that they can go on about their business, not get sniped by other teams that know exactly what they're doing and go for that. I just do not see any reason for the Steelers to be gunning so hard for the quarterback position this year, when, again, they know that next year is going to be the year, and they've shown this by the amount of comp picks that they've been willing to amass based off of the formula that they've set up for themselves right now. So to me, I think that this is along the lines of what you're saying, Vince. I don't think it's intentional, but I do think that they're willing to take advantage of it. They're like, hey, you know what? Let's keep people guessing. Let people think that we need a quarterback, because here's what happens. When people think you need a position that you don't need, all of a sudden, you see teams trying to pick quarterbacks before you, because we can't let this guy get to them because that's who they really want. So we have to jump ahead of them to take there. So then all of a sudden, quarterbacks being taken ahead of you and you didn't want quarterbacks, that's going to drop every other position down a few spots. So, like, say Kenneth Grant could have been taken a spot or two before the Steelers, pick we're set to pick, but because teams think that the Steelers are so willing to draft a quarterback, they trade up ahead of them, they draft a quarterback, and then all of a sudden Kenneth Grant falls to the Steelers, and that's who they wanted the whole time. That kind of stuff happens. That kind of stuff happens all the time, but that's why you want to leave your true plan in a mystery. You don't want teams to know what you're up to. And I think that's part of what the Steelers are doing right now. They're like, yeah, sure. We're interested in Jalen Milroe in the third, but maybe in the first. Jackson Dart, same thing. I just don't see it with those guys. Both have a long ways to develop. I think Jackson Dart has some tools. I think Jalen Milroe has some tools, but all those tools need time to develop. And I don't think that's first round worthy with the way those guys are. And if those guys, and I think that if you're the Steelers and you're drafting, if they do draft them in the first round this year, it sets yourself up to make it a really hard time to drafting another quarterback in the first round next year. So my opinion, no, they're not actually trying to do this. I don't think that they're going with a full on, scandal to tell Aaron Rodgers to just not tell anyone that you've signed. But I do think that they're like, hey, Aaron, take your time, buddy. do what you got to do, because they want that mystery shrouded around them. They want people to think that they're not solid there so that they can make other moves. That's where I think the Steelers are coming from. And I think that that's what could actually be a more plausible way for them to approach this situation. Thank you for the calls, Vince and Bryce. As always, you can call in at 412-223-6644. Leave your name, your question, and keep your question under a minute. And let us know where you're from, too, because we love to reference and show how big Steeler Nation spreads far and wide. We got one more segment, and that's Mock Draft Monday. Who won and who are the picks? We'll discuss that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our show here today on Mock Draft Monday, and we get to your mock drafts. First of all, as always, we want to thank everyone that sends their mock drafts in, whether it's via email, via Twitter, via Instagram, whatever you use, Blue Sky, all the things. This week's winner came from the Locked On Steelers Facebook group, so shout out to everyone there and all our moderators in that group. So the only rule this week was you had to take a running back before the fourth round. So as long as you did that, you did a solid job and you were adding to it, because I do think the Steelers are going to try to add a talented running back to this running back room at some point this offseason. So that's part of what the experiment was. But everything else was game. Trading up, trading back, whatever it was you wanted to do, you could pretty much do it in this game. Or in this round, as long as you get a running back before the fourth round, which means first or third round, unless you trade for picks. Now, this person who won this week, congratulations to Renee Agard. Now, Renee, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, but Renee's from Denmark, and I'm really excited because it's just another example of how far and wide Steeler Nation spreads. But Renee posted in the Locked On Steelers Facebook group. So congratulations, Renee. You won here because you accomplished a few things here. One, you got your running back, and I like the running back that you got. You got a quarterback. You got the D-line early. You doubled down on D-line. You got some offensive line help, and then you got a safety. I like a lot of these moves. So for those who can't see what he's doing, if you're listening on the audio platform, Renee traded with the Chiefs, traded back with the Chiefs, gave them the 21st overall pick, picked up the 31st overall pick, so swapping picks to go up at 10 picks backwards, and then picked up a third round pick this year, which he was able to double down in the third round and get his offensive playmakers. Now, Derek Harmon at defensive line, I like Derek Harmon. I think that he's the closest build-wise in this NFL draft class to Cam Hayward. He's even talked about Cam Hayward. He's talked about Chris Jones. I like that pick very much. 31, great value, great situation. I think that you're in a good spot there. Now, the interesting thing will be Caleb Johnson in the early part of the third round, being there, the running back out of Iowa, a guy who looks shifty, a guy who looks like he could fit Arthur Smith's system. But they need to see it. And I think that that's going to be interesting to see if he's the guy there. But I like that pick, Caleb Johnson, early in the third. That could be a good sweet spot to go get him because his value is pretty interesting if you look at things right now. Then at the 83rd overall pick, the Steelers' natural third round pick that they have, Renee goes Tyler Shuck. Now, some people really believe in Tyler Shuck because he's flashed some opportunities here and there. I don't see it. It's just not me that I think he's all that. I do think he's good. I think he has the talent and potential, but I do think that he needs a lot more work than what people let on, even though he is 26 years old coming out of college. So I have questions there. But again, for Renee and why this worked, you double down at D tackle with Jamari Caldwell out of Oregon. You get interior offensive lineman with Miles Frazier, and then an offensive tackle with Jalen Travis. Those guys of LSU and Iowa State, and then of course safety Jalen Reed of Penn State. Lots of options in this group, and I like the way that this was attacked. Giving up that first round pick, still getting your stud at defensive tackle, and then using that to get leverage to get another player that could be of the caliber that you're looking for. And again, running back, definitely a need right now for the Steelers, because even though Jaylen Warren, I think he can be the guy. I also think he's going to need some help, because you're going to want to split things up with him and not wear him down too fast, because he's just a smaller guy. So that's so I think that there's merit there. I think that's why I'm looking at running backs right now as far as other options for the Steelers. So that'll be interesting moving forward. Caleb Johnson, certainly one of those guys. But thank you again to everyone who played in this week's Mock Draft Monday. As always, if you ever want to find this post, if you ever want to post your mock draft, you go to the Locked On Steelers Facebook group. You can go to Twitter at Carter Critiques, Blue Sky at Carter Critiques. Look for the postings that I make there leading into the weekend, and then we choose which one fits best with what we're talking about. So thanks again for everyone who tunes into the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, all the social media handles. Same handle everywhere, at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette at post-gazette.com, and find me here every Monday through Friday on your favorite podcasting app or on YouTube, covering your Pittsburgh Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.